Okay, so let's look at the organization of the human body. And we're going to start off by looking at the organ systems. So we're going to start off looking at the integumentary system. So the integumentary system is mainly our skin and the other organs associated with that. So just a few functions there. It protects us from the environment. It's also used in temperature control. Next is the skeletal system. So we see there. This also has a protective function. So, you hit your skull. It's nice that you have a skull there so you're not hitting your brain. All right. It also provides support for the body. We also get blood cell production out of our skeletal system and also mineral storage. Next is the muscular system. So this is showing the muscular system here. So the muscular system provides us with movement. It also provides us with support, keeps us upright, and also heat production. Next is the nervous system. So our nervous system directs responses to stimuli. It also coordinates and controls the activities of our other organ systems. Next is the endocrine system, which mainly deals with hormones. This is a major regulatory system that influences the other organ systems. So it's another one of these control systems. Next is the cardiovascular system. Here we're going to have the internal transport of cells and dissolved substances, which include nutrients, waste, and gas products. Next is the lymphatic system. This is another vessel system here. Part of it is used for defense against infections and diseases. Next is our respiratory system here. So this is going to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide gases between the blood and the air. Next is the digestive system. So here we have the processing of foods and the absorption of nutrients and the elimination of waste products. Next is the urinary system. So the urinary system filters our blood, it eliminates waste, as well as excess salts and excess water that we have in us. And lastly is the reproductive systems, and those are there for the production of offspring. All right, let's take a look at body cavities that we have. So when we talk about body cavities, we first have to separate our body into two portions. One is the appendicular portions, that's your upper and lower limbs. All right, and we do have cavities in those, and those are synovial cavities. Those are joint cavities. So any movable joint like that, there's a small cavity in there. All right, next is the actual portion of our body, which includes our head, neck, and trunk. All right, so if we look at this, we have the dorsal body cavity, you see there. So our dorsal body cavity surrounds our brain and our spinal cord. And that can be separated into two smaller cavities. One is a cranial cavity, which houses the brain, and the next is a vertebral canal, which houses the spinal cord. All right. Next is the ventral cavity. So that's all of this is the ventral cavity. All right. So our ventral cavity surrounds the organs of the trunk. All right. So these internal organs are known as viscera. All right. So we have two separations here. We have the thoracic cavity that's up here, and down here is the abdominal pelvic cavity. All right. So the thoracic cavity houses the heart and the lungs. All right. And this is divided by what is known as the mediastinum. So that's the heart in there and some other tissue. All right. Next is the abdominal pelvic cavity down here. The abdominal pelvic cavity has the abdominal cavity, which is right here, and this primarily houses digestive organs. All right, and then we have the pelvic cavity, which is down there. That's within the pelvis. These two cavities are not separated from each other at all. This primarily houses reproductive and urinary system organs. Now, the thoracic cavity is separated from the abdominal pelvic cavity by the diaphragm, all right, which is a muscle that helps us breathe. All right, so let's take a look at some other cavities. Most of these are in the head. One is the oral cavity, which we typically think of as our mouth. Next is the nasal cavity there. It's behind the nose. All right, we have sinuses. They're showing a couple sinuses here. There's another sinuses there. These are hollow cavities within cranial bones. We have the orbital cavities. Those house our eyes. All right, we have the middle ear cavity here. We also have digestive cavities within our abdominal pelvic cavity. So, there's nothing in your stomach. There's still a cavity within your stomach. All right. And lastly, our synovial cavities, which I kind of mentioned already. All right, let's take a look at serous membranes. Now, serous membranes, also known as serosa, these are membranes that line body cavities and organs. All right, and so what they do is they produce serous fluid, which is a lubricant. And so this is fluid that reduces friction between the organs. So we think about like our heart beating in our chest, you know, that heart's gonna move against the other organs around it, anywhere from 60 to 100 times a minute, all right? And so anytime you have movement, you're gonna have a little friction there. So we line all these organs and the cavity walls of these things with a membrane that produces a lubricant on it. And so that's what we call serous membranes. Now, there are two types of serous membranes. One is called a parietal serosa. So parietal means around. These are membranes that line the cavity walls. And the other is called a visceral serosa. And this is a membrane that is actually on the organs, all right? So if we look at this is trying to show an analogy to this. So if you took your hand and you stuck it within a balloon, you would have part of the balloon on the hand and then part of it out here, all right? So this would be essentially where the visceral serosa is, and out here is where the parietal serosa is. Now you can see that these two membranes are actually continuous with each other, and that's the way they are in us as well. And what this does is it also creates a cavity here in between those two membranes, and that cavity contains a serous fluid. All right, so when our heart is beating in our chest, our visceral membrane is moving, it's a parietal membrane, both of which are producing that lubricant. All right, let's look at specific serosas. All right, so first is around the heart. So these are called pericardial membranes, so membranes that surround the heart. We have a visceral serosa, which is on the heart, and a parietal serosa, which is around the outside of that. Okay, so the space in between is called the pericardial cavity. So that's the space between the parietal and visceral pericardium. On the lungs, these are called pleural membranes. So these are membranes around the lungs. So we have a parietal pleura, which is on the outside here in blue, and then a visceral pleura in red there, once again, that's on the lungs. There's a little space in between the two, which is called the pleural cavity. So this is a space between the parietal and visceral pleura. Next is peritoneal membranes, which are found here in the abdominal pelvic cavity. So these are membranes that surround the abdominal pelvic cavity and organs. Here we have a parietal peritoneum, which is shown in blue once again. So this surrounds the entire abdominal pelvic cavity. And next we have a visceral peritoneum, which is in red there. And this is a membrane that surrounds each organ in the abdominal pelvic cavity. So also in here, they're trying to show this in purple, is what is known as a mesentery, which is a double-layered fold of this peritoneal membrane. We do have this space that gets created between these membranes, and this is known as the peritoneal cavity. All right, and that cavity contains serous fluid.